Imagine opening your door to find angels standing there and not even knowing it. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating encounters in Genesis 18, where divine visitors show up at Abraham's tent. We'll unpack ancient hospitality customs, surprising promises, and what this means for us today. And with me is our biblical culture expert. Take it away.
You know, what's really fascinating about this story is how it begins with something so ordinary, just a man sitting at his tent entrance during the heat of the day. But it turns into one of the most extraordinary divine encounters in Scripture.
And Abraham had no idea who these visitors were at first, right?
Exactly. And that's what makes his response so remarkable. According to ancient Near Eastern texts, there were actually 7 specific codes of conduct for hospitality that everyone was expected to follow.
7 codes? Tell me more about those.
Well, first, there was a specific zone around settlements where people were obligated to show hospitality to strangers. The goal was to transform potential threats into allies through generous welcome.
That's fascinating. Hospitality as a peacemaking strategy.
Right, and only the male head of household could extend the invitation. The time span would be stated up front, but could be extended if both parties agreed.
Could people refuse the hospitality?
They could, but it was considered a serious insult that could lead to immediate conflict. Once accepted, though, there were strict rules both host and guest had to follow.
And Abraham really went above and beyond with these visitors, didn't he?
He absolutely did. He ran to meet them, bowed to the ground, and immediately offered water for their feet and rest under the tree. Then he promised a little bread, but actually prepared an elaborate feast.
Wait, so he kind of undersold what he was going to provide?
Yes, and that was actually part of the hospitality code. The host would modestly offer something simple, but was expected to provide the best they had available.
That's such a different mindset from our modern what you see is what you get approach.
And it's why this story became the basis for Hebrews 13:2. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it.
So let's talk about what happens next. These visitors deliver quite a shocking message, don't they?
They announce that Sarah will have a son within a year, and Sarah, who's listening from inside the tent, responds with laughter.
And not the good kind of laughter, I'm guessing?
No, it was laughter of disbelief. The text says she laughed within herself. It was an internal reaction of skepticism.
But then something really interesting happens. She denies laughing when confronted about it.
Yes, and this is such a human moment. The text tells us she denied it because she was afraid. She realized she was dealing with someone who could perceive her inner thoughts.
That must have been terrifying, realizing you just got caught doubting God to his face.
And yet, God's response is remarkably gentle. He simply says, "No, but you did laugh." There's no punishment, just a calm assertion of truth.
You know what's fascinating? The whole laughter theme actually connects to the name Isaac, doesn't it?
Exactly. Isaac means laughing in Hebrew. So this moment becomes part of a larger narrative about laughter, both of doubt and eventually of joy.
But the story takes a serious turn after this, right?
Yes, the visitors reveal they're heading to Sodom and Gomorrah for judgment. And this leads to one of the most remarkable intercessory prayers in Scripture.
Tell us about that. What makes this prayer so special?
Abraham shows incredible boldness. He actually challenges God's justice, asking if he would sweep away the righteous with the wicked.
That seems pretty daring, questioning God's justice like that.
But it comes from a place of deep relationship and trust. Abraham approaches God with what scholars call parrhesia, a kind of holy boldness or freedom of speech.
And he keeps negotiating down the number, right?
Yes, from 50 righteous people all the way down to 10. It's a masterclass in intercessory prayer.
What strikes me is how personal this all is. It's not just abstract theology.
That's exactly right. Abraham is deeply concerned about real people and real justice. He's not afraid to wrestle with difficult questions.
So what can we learn from this chapter for our lives today?
Well, first, there's this beautiful picture of hospitality as a sacred duty. In our increasingly isolated world, that's something worth recovering.
And I suppose we never know when an act of hospitality might be more significant than we realize.
Exactly. Then there's Sarah's response to God's promise. It reminds us that it's okay to struggle with doubt, but God gently calls us to faith.
What about Abraham's intercession? Any lessons there?
It shows us that we can approach God boldly with our concerns for others, grounding our prayers in God's character and justice.
That's really encouraging, that we can be honest with God about our questions and concerns.
And notice how God doesn't rebuke Abraham for his boldness. He engages with him. showing that genuine wrestling with faith is part of authentic relationship with God.
You mentioned earlier about the hospitality codes. How might those translate today?
Well, while the specific codes might be different, the principle of transforming strangers into friends through generous welcome is still powerful.
And I imagine that's especially important in our divided world.
Absolutely. Hospitality can be a radical act of peacemaking, just as it was in Abraham's time.
What about Sarah's laughter? Any modern parallels there?
Oh, definitely. How often do we laugh off God's promises because they seem impossible by human standards?
And then try to cover up our doubt when we're confronted with it?
Right, but God's response shows he's more interested in growing our faith than condemning our doubts.
That's really freeing, knowing we don't have to pretend we never doubt.
And it's worth noting that Sarah's story doesn't end with her doubt. She eventually embraces God's promise, and it becomes a source of joy.
So there's hope for all of us doubters.
Absolutely. The key is remaining in dialogue with God, just like Abraham did in his intercession.
Speaking of which, what can we learn from Abraham's negotiation technique?
He bases his appeal on God's character. Will not the judge of all the earth do right? That's a powerful model for prayer.
So it's not just asking for what we want, but aligning our requests with God's nature?
Exactly. And notice how persistent Abraham is. He keeps pressing forward respectfully but boldly.
Any final thoughts on this remarkable chapter?
I think it shows us that faith isn't about having everything figured out. It's about staying in relationship with God through our doubts, questions, and concerns.
And being willing to extend that same grace to others through hospitality.
Yes, and remembering that sometimes the most ordinary moments, like welcoming strangers or wrestling with doubt, can become sacred encounters.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Copilot Podcasts. Remember, your next visitor might not be an angel, but every act of hospitality carries divine possibility. Thanks for listening.